Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Space This Week, the Monday rundown of all the latest news regarding space flights, spaceships, and space exploration. There's quite a lot of exciting things happening over the next few days, and I can't wait to tell you all about them. Before setting off, make sure you've subscribed down below to get notified of these videos when they're at their most relevant, and then once you've done that, you can settle back and enjoy our coverage of all the launches that we saw happen last week. Last week, there were no launches. Alright, I suppose I should elaborate a bit. We had expected there to be a suborbital spaceflight of Virgin Galactic's VSS Unity last week, the first spaceflight of the vehicle in fact, but unfortunately Virgin Galactic stated that during pre-flight preparations, it was decided that more time was needed for technical checks before launch. Now, since they haven't stated that some disastrous error was found with the vehicle, then hopefully that means we won't have to wait too long for the next launch opportunity, but right now, no dates have been confirmed. One can hope that it'll still be sometime in February though. The other launch expected to take place last week was another SpaceX Starlink launch, but this has now been delayed to today, actually. So we can skip over this one and discuss it in our This Week segment. On the subject of SpaceX though, they've been hard at work over at Boca Chica. Starship development continues at an ever-impressive pace, as Brendan's latest diagram here shows, and wow, I'm really liking the new visual style he's adopted here. There haven't really been any major development since last week, and I can't help but feel that this week's coverage of Starship was always destined to be a little dulled, given that last week we saw another almost completely successful high-altitude flight test of the SN9. But the SN10 is looking closer and closer to flight ready with each day that passes, so hopefully it won't be very long before I can talk about another full-scale flight test, hopefully with a slightly softer landing this time though. In other space news from last week, a big announcement was made regarding the Europa Clipper. This is one of the most exciting upcoming NASA missions in my opinion. The spacecraft will travel to the mysterious icy moon of Europa, which orbits Jupiter, and will assess the habitability of the vast ocean of liquid water that exists beneath the moon's icy outer crust. Europa is one of the leading candidates for being a potential life-supporting celestial object in our solar system, and sending a dedicated mission to try and find evidence of life is huge. But the mission has always come with a big catch. By law, it has to launch on an SLS rocket. The spacecraft will be launch ready by 2024, and the SLS is being developed at such a slow pace that the fate of the Clipper was becoming rather uncertain, given that using an SLS to launch it would deprive a launch vehicle from the Artemis moon landing program and would cost as much as $1.5 billion more than a commercial alternative. But on February the 10th, it was finally decided that NASA would go with a commercial rocket instead, rather than the SLS. A decision hasn't been reached regarding which rocket this will be, though many are speculating it'll be a Falcon Heavy. This is overall good news, as this means we won't be one SLS down for Artemis, NASA will save a colossal amount of money, and we can more or less guarantee now that the Europa Clipper will launch on time. The only real drawback is that without the power of the SLS, the spacecraft won't be able to make a direct trip to Jupiter, which would take less than 3 years, and instead will need to make a few gravity assists to gain the necessary velocity to reach Europa, with arrival at Jupiter in April 2030 instead, around 5.5 years in total. Still, a slightly longer trip is probably a fair price to pay for such an enormous cost saving, and the guarantee of a launch vehicle being launch ready when the Europa Clipper is certainly a good thing as well. Anyway, that's it for real this time for our coverage of last week's news, so let us now move along to our next segment, all the launches expected to take place this week. And if you're enjoying this video so far, guys, then please leave a like down below. It really helps us stay alive in the algorithm. And that was it. Let's do segment transition now. The first launch of this week will be today, February the 15th. In fact, actually, it might well have already taken place, since its official launch time is/was 2 hours before I planned to publish this video. So obviously not enough time to write and edit this video to reflect what happened. Hopefully it went well. It'll be a Soyuz 2.1, which will carry cargo to resupply the International Space Station from the Baikonur Cosmodrome. As well as resupplying the space station, the mission will also deorbit the Russian Pirs module in order to make way for its replacement, the Nauka module, which will arrive later this year. Piers has been a feature of the ISS for nearly 20 years, so it'll be sad to see it go. But I guess that's just progress. As fate would cruelly have it, Soyuz is not the only launch slated to take place this week before the publication of this video. At just shy of 5 AM UTC, SpaceX will be launching their next Starlink mission. This flight has unfortunately seen numerous delays, but hopefully it's now finally happened. The plan was for the Falcon 9 to launch from Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral, as usual carrying 60 Starlink satellites. The satellites were hopefully successfully placed into a 500-kilometer circular low Earth orbit, and the first stage hopefully successfully touched down 633 kilometers downrange on the Of Course I Still Love You drone ship. Both fairing halves to this mission are brand new, and the recovery ships Ms. Tree and Ms. Chief are stationed downrange to attempt recovery of both halves. Bit of a shame that 2 of the launches this week take place before this video's upload, but I guess spaceflight stops for no one, not even small YouTube channels that report on spaceflight. The selfish beanbags. The day after tomorrow, on February the 17th, SpaceX will launch another Starlink mission. This will once again launch aboard a Falcon 9 from Launch Complex 39A at the Kennedy Space Center, carrying 60 Starlink satellites on board. The first stage is expected to land 633 kilometers downrange on the Just Read the Instructions drone ship, and we can expect the fairings to be recovered by the recovery ships Ms. Tree and Ms. Chief as well. All in all, it's a fairly standard going Starlink mission, so there's not a great deal more to discuss with this one. The next launch will be on the 20th of February and will be an Antares rocket launching from the Mid-Atlantic Regional Spaceport. On board will be a Cygnus resupply probe for the International Space Station, and the rocket will also be carrying a technology demonstration satellite on behalf of Khalifa University in the United Arab Emirates, as well as 42 ThinSats as part of a STEM outreach program for grades 4 to 12 by the Virginia Commercial Space Flight Authority. Once its mission has been completed, the resupply vessel will perform a safe, destructive re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere over the Pacific Ocean. Now, while not a launch, we do have a very exciting landing expected to take place this week. Yes, I am of course referring to the anticipated touchdown of Perseverance, NASA's latest Mars rover, onto the surface of the Red Planet. If all goes to plan, it'll touch down on February the 18th. Also landing will be the helicopter Ingenuity, which is an experimental aircraft designed to establish if flight is feasible in the thin Martian atmosphere. We talked a fair amount about the ins and outs of this mission on our very first episode of Space This Week when the mission launched. I'll leave a link to that if you want to find out more. It's in the corner of the video or in the description. For now, I'm actually going to leave our coverage of Perseverance at that, so that we can cover it in depth next week after it hopefully lands successfully, without ending up repeating myself from stuff I said today as well. The touchdown of Perseverance is the last preview of the week that I wanted to talk about, so that means that it's time to roll the transition to our next segment, where we'll take a look at all the most interesting anniversaries relating to spaceflight expected to take place over the next 7 days. We begin our history segment with a birthday. On this day, February the 15th in 1564, Galileo Galilei was born. Galileo was one of the most influential figures in science, making huge advancements in the fields of mathematics, physics, and astronomy. He was so influential, in fact, that he's been described as the father of observational astronomy, the father of modern physics, the father of modern science, and the father of the scientific method. His contributions to astronomy include, but are certainly not limited to, the telescopic confirmation of the phases of Venus, the discovery of the 4 largest satellites of Jupiter, often referred to now as the Galilean moons, the observation of Saturn's rings, and the analysis of sunspots. Galileo was also a big believer of heliocentrism and Copernicism, which was a rather controversial stance to have at the time. Obviously we know now that those were the correct stances to have. Happy 457th birthday to you, Galileo. Our next anniversary takes place today as well, though in the slightly more recent time of 2013, when a meteor exploded over Russia, generating a shockwave that blew out windows, rocked buildings, and injured 1,500 people. Given the prominent dominance of dashcams in Russia, we got lots of awesome footage of the event, such as this clip playing right now. What's kind of funny about the meteor is that the explosion happened mere hours before the expected closest ever approach of the larger and entirely unrelated asteroid 2012 DA14. A little later in the week, on February the 18th, this time in 1930, while studying photographs taken in January, Clyde Tombaugh discovered Pluto. Tombaugh made his discovery by systematically imaging the night sky in pairs of photographs and then rapidly flicking between the photos using a blink comparator to create the illusion of movement of any objects that had changed position or appearance between the photographs. The discovery of Pluto was made after about 1 year of searching. It was declared to be the 9th planet from the Sun initially, but from the early 1990s its planetary status was questioned following the discovery of several objects of similar size elsewhere in the solar system, including the dwarf planet Eris. This led the International Astronomical Union to formally define the term planet in 2006, a definition that excluded Pluto, reclassifying it as a dwarf planet. Despite being discovered nearly 100 years ago, Pluto has yet to complete a full orbit of the Sun since its discovery, as one Plutonian year is nearly 248 Earth years long. It was only until 2015 that we actually found out what it looked like, when New Horizons performed a flyby and sent back these historic images, revealing Pluto to have this wonderful heart-shaped basin. Isn't that nice? On February the 20th in 1962, US astronaut John Glenn became the first American to orbit the Earth, making 3 orbits over around 5 hours aboard his Mercury capsule named Friendship 7. While this was the first American orbital spaceflight, it was the 5th human spaceflight overall, preceded by the Soviet orbital flights Vostok 1 and 2, and American suborbital flights Mercury Redstone 3 and 4. The Mercury capsule successfully splashed down in the North Atlantic Ocean and is now on display in the Milestones of Flight Hall at the US National Air and Space Museum. On February the 20th in 1965, the American Ranger 8 space probe crashed into the surface of the Moon, as planned, after successfully photographing possible landing sites for the upcoming Apollo program, and in doing so became the first spacecraft to obtain close-up images of the Moon's surface. It had 4 television Vidicon cameras on board, 2 full scan and 4 partial scan. On February the 20th again, but this time in the Soviet Union in 1986, the first component of the Mir space station was launched. The space station would be constructed over 6 further launches, and in the process it became the first ever modularly constructed space station and was the largest artificial satellite ever created, succeeded only by the International Space Station. Mir remained in orbit until 2001, when its orbit decayed and it re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, with its role now fulfilled by the larger International Space Station. Mir still holds the record for longest single human spaceflight, with cosmonaut Valery Polyakov spending 437 days and 18 hours aboard the station. Overall, Mir was occupied for a total of 12.5 years out of its 15-year lifespan, and will forever be one of the most important achievements humankind has ever made in terms of spaceflight. Our final anniversary of the week is on February the 21st, when, in 1972, the Soviet Union landed their unmanned probe, Luna 20, on the surface of the Moon. The Lunar program was the robotic competitor to America's manned Apollo missions, and in a similar vein to Apollo, the program returned lunar surface samples. The probe extracted a small sample of lunar soil before launching it back to Earth on the 22nd of February. Samples from the mission were shared with American and French scientists, and a small quantity was sent to Britain. And that's it, all the best historic anniversaries that'll be taking place this week. And that's it for another episode of Space This Week. Guys, I do very much hope you enjoyed today's video. And of course, I'm sure you're all looking forward to watching the Perseverance rover land successfully this week. I know I certainly am. We've also got a good selection of historic anniversaries to celebrate along the way as well. And there's a couple of interesting looking rocket launches taking place over the next 7 days. So all in all, a pretty good week. And if you want to look back at previous weeks, then why not look at the previous episodes of Space This Week? segueing to our end screen there. On the left is a link to the full Space This Week playlist. On the right is a video chosen for you by YouTube's recommendation algorithm based on your viewing habits. There's a link to subscribe and check out my Patreon if you want to support me monetarily, and in the description you find links to social media and merch and stuff, and I'm running out of time, so thank you for watching, everyone. Goodbye.